The name being talked about the most day one of the NFL Scouting Combine is not a name that is draft eligible. That plus more on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for February 26, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you, whether you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast or you're checking us out by way of the YouTube page. We appreciate both. The show continues to grow each and every day. That's because of your support, Raider Nation, your consistent support each and every day, checking in with us. And, of course, the job that my man Ari does behind the scenes on the YouTube page, even when I'm on the road, does a fantastic job. We definitely shout him out. We appreciate him. And even when the radio station is having issues, and trust and believe they're having issues this week, it's okay. We're still cooking here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So really good and really proud about that. And we got a lot coming up on today's show. I had an opportunity to catch up with head coach Pete Carroll and GM John Spytek on Tuesday, and even got a little extra opportunity to catch up with Pete Carroll, a little off to the side scrum that we had multiple members of the local media, something I look forward to here at the Scouting Combine each and every time that we're here. So you'll hear from Pete Carroll. Got probably about a good 20 minutes. You'll hear from him off to the side, not what was streamed on Raiders.com live from the podium, but what we were able to do, sit down, have a conversation with him. You're able to hear the questions a lot better, and he gives us a little bit more intimate answers. So you'll hear from head coach Pete Carroll coming up in segment number 2 and segment number 3 as he met with the local media here in Indianapolis. Here in segment number 1, we'll talk about the biggest name that's being talked about so far at the Scouting Combine, and he's not even draft eligible. As a matter of fact, we'll jump right into that, and that name is Matt Stafford. And it's funny, we've been talking about Matt Stafford, the current Rams quarterback, multiple times here on the show, and he was a guy that, I was asked early in the day. I made a quick appearance on my radio show, Joe and Q, on ESPN Radio. They had me do a check-in from Indy, and the first thing Joe Fortenbaugh asked me was, what's the name that you're hearing the most? And I said, man, for me, it's Matt Stafford. Everyone is talking about Matt Stafford. Then I had a chance to catch up with Ian Rappaport from NFL Network. I asked him the same thing, and he said, Matt Stafford, it's just the name that's out there right now. The Rams have given his agent permission to go out there and seek a trade. And it's funny because every time a media member at the podium would ask a GM or a head coach like a GM John Spytek and Pete Carroll, what are their thoughts on Matt Stafford if they'd go out there and try to make a move to improve the quarterback room and bring that veteran in, they just declined to talk about a player that is currently on another team's roster. Now, the thing about it is they could technically speak on him without really speaking about him because, again, his agent has been given permission to go out there and try to seek a trade, but they're not going to go out there and they're not going to mention him by name and talk about if or if not that they would like to bring him in to the quarterback room. But you would have to think, one would think that he is a guy that at least is being talked about, and it might only be lukewarm conversations. It might be hot and heavy conversations, but it sounds like he's being at least talked about and bantered over. As long as you're a team that needs a quarterback, it sounds like there's conversations going on across the league about Matt Stafford and how real it could possibly be. And talking to many people, I talked to Jordan Ronan, who covers the Giants. I said, was there any interest in Matt Stafford? He said, I think there's some legs there. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to go out and make a trade for Matt Stafford, but he does think there's some legs there. As I mentioned, talked to Ian Rappaport, and he feels like teams are definitely doing their due diligence. And look, I'll be honest, I think that the Raiders are definitely doing their due diligence. I just don't know how far it would really go. Now, if you're telling me that the Raiders are going to get Matt Stafford for a couple years, maybe a 3-year deal, 2 years fully guaranteed, and he's going to be able to, go ahead and just be that quarterback and even maybe possibly mentor a guy, help groom a guy to take over, then maybe I'd be interested. Again, he wants to be a part of the $50 million a year club, so that's probably where the money's going to be, about 3 years, 150, like $100 million guaranteed. And if the Raiders feel like that's good money to help them win right now, then maybe that's a direction that they would go in. Of course, there is talent on the team. Competent quarterback play, consistent quarterback play is definitely what they're looking for. Do they need to improve the roster still? Absolutely. That includes the offensive line. Clearly, the run game as well needs to be improved, and there's still elements of the defense that needs to be improved. But the one thing I could say about speaking with head coach Pete Carroll and GM John Spytek on Tuesday, these guys want to win right now. Now, does that mean that they're going to go out and win Super Bowl 60? No, I'm not saying that. But they definitely want to be a team that's winning 9, 10, 8, 9, 10 games, whatever, competing for a playoff spot, a berth out of the AFC West. Like, that's what they want. Pete Carroll told us straight up, and you'll hear it coming up in segment number 2 or 3, because both will be head coach Pete Carroll. I don't want a grace period. I don't want a couple-year ramp-up. I want to be able to go in there, hit the ground running and win immediately and fill up Allegiant Stadium with our fans. And that's not just coach speak. He's like real deal, ready to win now, wants to win now. He's not interested in a rebuild thing. That's something that he told us at his introductory press conference, but again, reiterated it multiple times, whether it was at the podium or it was off to the side when he met with the local media, that it's about winning right now. And again, it's not saying that it's going to be a team that's going to go win the AFC West or a team that's going to go to the Super Bowl and hoist the Lombardi when it's all said and done. But it's also not a team that's going to win 4 games. Right, and I've looked at it just going back and looking at the history of Pete and his track record. I mean, the floor, as far as I'm concerned, is 6 wins. I mean, he's never had less than 6 wins in a season, and that's nothing to write home about and get excited about and do a backflip over. But that, to me, is where the floor is, and he's going to try to build off of that and see what he can do with the Raiders in year 1. And obviously the building process starts right now. There's a lot going on here in Indy. As he told us, he was talking to coaches, trying to get, just familiar with them, talking to scouts. Obviously, he's going to be meeting with prospects throughout the course of the next few days here in Indianapolis. So they have a lot of work to do. The easy part was what he did on Tuesday, meeting with the media, going to the podium and talking to a bunch of not only Raider media, but Seattle media as well. A lot of former Seahawk people were, or at least talking to him about his time with Seattle. So there was a lot of that going on. That was probably the easiest thing that he's going to have to do here in Indianapolis. The rest will be, sitting down, having the interview process. The dude is genuine when he comes with his energy. He's genuine when he's talking about competition, right? I mean, he just repeated that competition, repeated that so many times throughout the multiple times that we got a chance to catch up with him on Tuesday. So, he let it be known, hey, if guys want to go out there and compete and really put their best foot forward and give them everything they got on the field, not just go and play football and reap the benefits and get a nice paycheck, right? There's room for that, just not on the Raiders. So something to pay attention to as they're trying to put everything together for the silver and black. But the big name was Matt Stafford. I definitely think that the Raiders are probably having conversations about Matt Stafford. at the end of the day, I've said it multiple times, I think what's going to happen is his agent's going to find a deal that they're comfortable with. They're going to find some trade, like draft capital that they're going to say, okay, this is what so-and-so team, whether that's the Raiders, the Giants, the Browns, whoever they may be, is willing to give up to acquire him. They're going to take it back to the Rams. They're going to say, we don't see you as a $50 million a year guy. I know you don't see you as a 45. How about we split the difference and get around 48? And they're going to say, okay, bet. I just think at the end of the day that the Rams are better with Matt Stafford and Matt Stafford is better with the Rams. I don't think that he's going to want to make a big jump and go to New York or Cleveland and try to uproot his family. And again, when I say that, the one thing that keeps the Raiders in the mix is Vegas is not that far from L.A. Probably wouldn't have to move his family at all, right? Just head down the highway a little bit, a quick flight to Vegas, whatever the case may be, and he can make it work. So that's why I think that they're still in the mix. I just don't think it's as, I would say, as hot and heavy as some people might think it is. I know Vinny Bonsignore, who has covered the Rams beat in the L.A. scene for a very long time, is very adamant about Matt Stafford being in play for the Raiders, and they very well might be, right? And feels like the Tom Brady influence is real, and that Tom Brady would love to see a guy like Matt Stafford take over for a couple years at that quarterback position and then make way. And then that gives them more options that they can have, at the top of the draft. What would you have to give up for a guy like that? I wouldn't want to give up, more than a third-round pick. Maybe the third-round pick that you get from the Devontae trade. Don't think that the Rams would go for that, but if they would, then I'd be interested in it, right? The money, not really worried about the money. $100 million guaranteed, cool, price of doing business. Give up that third-round pick. They might have to give up the second-round pick, though. If that's what they wanted to do, they might not budge on a third, but they might budge on a second. My guy, the good doc, actually hit me up the other night, matter of fact, Monday night, and said, Q, I'm kind of intrigued by Stafford. What if the Raiders traded for Stafford, drafted Mason Graham, the big defensive tackle out of Michigan, at number 6, and then got Milroe in round 2 and let him sit behind Matt Stafford for a little while. Would you be interested in that? And that kind of piqued my interest, but that's where that second-round pick comes into play. The Raiders might have to give that up if, in fact, they did want to go and get one Matt Stafford. But, again, I don't know if that's what they want at all. Also, one other note before we hear from head coach Pete Carroll. Apparently, when he was on with Sirius XM, Pat Kerwin and company, he's really good friends with Pat Kerwin. He mentioned that training camp was going to be in Napa, and a lot of Raider Nation hit me up and tweeted at me and sent me texts. Q, did you hear that? Training camp's going back to Napa. Well, Vinny did his due diligence to try to confirm that, and the Raiders have not confirmed that yet. Vinny said in a tweet, he said, head coach Pete Carroll saying the Raiders are doing training camp in Napa. I'm told that is not a done deal, but it definitely sounds like it's the plan. So there you go. Take that for what it's worth. So what did Pete Carroll say that I heard that I was on the scene for? Well, you hear that coming up in segment number 2 with today's Locked On Raiders podcast. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to jump into part 1 of the conversation with Pete Carroll, the head coach of the Silver and Black. He took us to the side. It was Vic Tafer, Vinny Bonsignore, Tashawn Reed, Hondo Carpenter, Kevin Bollinger, me. It was a handful of us, just a local media. They do this each and every year here at the Combine. It's really one of the things I look forward to because, again, it's not the big, huge scrum where you can barely hear the questions. You can get your questions in. You can get a more intimate answer. And so got about 20 good minutes with head coach Pete Carroll. So here in segment number 2, we'll just jump into part 1 of the conversation that we had, little local media scrum with head coach Pete Carroll.
You talked about Patrick Graham and Robert Leonard. You also have a lot of defensive players who are free agents. Is it a priority to bring those guys back, or what are your thoughts on those guys?
Yes, it is. We want to keep our team together. So John's working at it. We're going to do everything we can to keep our guys in the fold. We need every one of them. So hopefully we'll be able to get that done.
Obviously, Tom Brady is the big voice when picking quarterbacks. I know that, but Mark's talked about that. But I have a question. With Chip Kelly, how much do you rely on your offensive coordinator when you're telling me? The reason I'm asking, I had a general manager say to me, they like Will Howard. He goes, but if Chip Kelly was my offensive coordinator, I'm going to listen to his voice more than mine because he knows him. I'm just curious, not Will in particular, but how much does Chip's voice matter to you when you're evaluating?
Tremendously. Everybody's got a voice in our program. Working with John is the primary relationship that I need to work at. And because I think that the relationship between the head coach and the general manager in the NFL is by far the most valuable and the most important relationship. And, I spent all those years with Johnny Snyder, up there 14 years working together. You would never have known who was calling the shots or who was making any decisions, or, you couldn't tell the difference, because that's a marriage that we need to make successful. And but that's just, to me, it's a high-performance mentality. You're using the people that have experience and have wherewithal and have something to offer. And Chip Kelly is a primary example of that. Tom Brady is the prime example of understanding what the position's all about. So that's not like some special way of thinking or something new that came to mind in this situation. That's just the way you compete. You either compete or you're not, and then you use everything that's available to you. And so that's why the relationship is so important, and we have to be in concert on everything that we do, and we will be. I'll guarantee that. And so, what you should look at the other way, how fortunate we are to have a coordinator with the kind of background, the kind of creative experience that Chip brings, to have Tom's background and his mentality and his approach and vision for what this position in particular, but just in competing in general is all about. Again, it isn't nothing new to me to say this to you. You're either competing or you're not. You got to use everything that's available to you, and so I'm certainly going to try to be the champion of all of that.
When you're in a situation, when the bullets start flying, let's say it's the day one free agency or you're on the clock in the draft, within that process, how does that work in live time? Let's say, maybe you and Spytek think different things, or you and Kelly think different things. How do you work those things out when it's 10 minutes
really
that you
well.
have to make a decision?
Yeah. Hopefully really well by laying the groundwork and being really clear on how we communicate and expectations of our communications, and where there's there aren't these preconceived concerns or issues or guys afraid to say something to me. I need the guys to to be loyal is to say the stuff that somebody else may not want to hear, but you need to tell them because you feel it in your heart it needs to be said, and then you deal with the ramifications, the repercussions of it, And so I'm trying to convince my guys in all aspects of our staff and support system that we need to hear from you. We need to hear what you think, and don't be afraid to say it. If you don't say it and you hold something back and we miss out on an opportunity, that ain't competing, And so there's an overriding thought here that guides what we're doing, and so it's a race right now because we don't have a lot of time together, and so that's why it's nonstop. And then I have to listen and watch and speak my piece too, so we can all get on the same page as soon as possible. But if the spirit, now we're going to deal with the spirit of that thought and the actuality of it. We'll see how we do, but the spirit is we're going to work together, and everybody's going to draw from all of the strengths we can possibly generate. And I don't know any other way to do it than that way. So
when you go back
hopefully we do. Like I said, we're going to do that really well. It's harder early when you have less, background information. All that for sure.
When you were in Seattle, you guys went through a few quarterbacks those first couple of years. Then you go out and sign a Matt Flynn, and you draft Russell Wilson that same year. And lo and behold, the rookie ends up starting over the guy that you signed in free agency. Does that change at all? Like that kind of mentality of, hey, if you go out and get somebody in free agency and you draft a rookie?
No, because it's about the competition. What we did is we took a look at every day of practice that we had building up to the first game of the season. And we looked at every highlighted day, the preseason games, and we had every single day mapped out. And we wrote in that situation, we rotated the three guys that were battling for the job every day, then different guy was the starter. And knowing that by the time we got to the third preseason game in Kansas City, that was when I wanted to make the decision if we could, so that going into the fourth game we would at least have our quarterback and ready to go. And it didn't matter where the guys came from and what their background was. If we did it properly and we really believed in what we were saying and we were going to stand for what we were saying, then we'd make the evaluation and hopefully it would work out. It did. Unfortunately, it wasn't great for for everybody because somebody loses out on the competition, but it worked out for our club and it worked out famously.
We've seen what your teams would look like when you've been a head coach other places. What is a John Spytek and Pete Carroll led team with the Raiders? What does that look like? What are the non-negotiables?
Yeah, you should see a team that plays with great effort. We start with effort. We critique effort first, because if you're not giving everything you got, what are you doing? What are you even in the program for? You're gonna see a team that plays with great enthusiasm and excitement for the game and love of the game. The passion shows up. You can feel their sense of love for what we're doing. And if the guys don't fit that, we're going to be looking for the guys that do fit that. We want a very physical team, very tough team. It's always been about great toughness on our club, and that comes in all different aspects, and it's highlighted by your special teams groups. Certainly what happens on defense and by running the football as well. And then we got to be really smart. So the elements of it are really great effort, great enthusiasm, great toughness, and playing smart football. That's when you see us play. That I hope you walk away and that's what you say about us. And I don't really give a hoot about what anybody else thinks of us. That's what we're going to establish for ourselves. And if it matches up, it gives us a chance to get to it the best that we have to offer. So it's a really clear outlook.
You mentioned having a sense of urgency and trying to get the ball rolling immediately. How does that mindset dictate the team's approach and free agency, or how you think it will? It
should weigh into every single decision we make. We're trying to take it as far as we can, as soon as we possibly can. Why would we do anything but that? I'm not looking for any grace period or some kind of cushy little give me a few years to get it going. I don't think that way at all. I'm talking today, tomorrow, and take it one step at a time. So we'll see what happens.
Coach, you talk about how much the team around the quarterback really needs to make sure that they help him out and really building around him. But in your opinion, when you look at the quarterback position, what are the, non-negotiables when you look at that position of what he needs to do to help out the rest of his team?
He's got to do his job. He's got to do the job that he's called on to do. He doesn't need to carry the team. He doesn't need to be the answer to all problems. I don't see it that way, and I never have. It's you build a great football team around each position, and the quarterback happens to be one of them. And to do that well, we have to put people in positions to do what they're good at, and so that we have to uncover what that is, and create the role, make it really clear and understand where they understand it, and then bring it to life through the preparation process of it all. I said this earlier about Coach Walsh said, the quarterback position is the hardest position in professional sports to play, and in that you have to do everything you can to make it easier on the quarterback by running the football, by playing defense, by kicking the ball well, by taking care of the football, by protecting him as well. The running game helps protect the quarterback from pass rush so that he can do his job at the best of his capability. And wherever that takes us, if we get that done, we're going to be pretty hard to beat.
So that was part one of the conversation with head coach Pete Carroll. Coming up in segment number 3, you'll hear the second half of our conversation. Again, he's a guy that doesn't rush his answers, spends, a lot of good quality time with us, spent like 25 minutes at the podium, and they're only supposed to do about 15 minutes, and then got another good 20 minutes with us off to the side. So I'm intrigued. I'm excited about being able to cover Pete Carroll because I do think that he's going to be a nice, calming, stable voice for the Raiders, and only good things could happen moving forward with that. So that's coming up in segment number 3. We'll start off, matter of fact, him responding to a question about being a player's coach and a disciplinarian at the same time. That'll come up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a great sponsor here on the show, and that's FanDuel. So when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. Even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can always stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Of course, I love to do the player prop bets. I love to get in on the action. I just like to see even what the player prop bets are. It just makes the game that much more fun. How about Luka and the Lakers versus the Dallas Mavericks? Huh? How about that one? That one's always going to be a fun one, isn't it? Hopefully you were able to catch that one on Tuesday night. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Time to jump into part 2 of the little media scrum, local media scrum we had with head coach Pete Carroll off to the side here in Indianapolis at the scouting combine as we really got day 1 wrapped up and in the books. So Pete Carroll is responding to the question about being a player's coach, but also being a disciplinarian at the same time and how that's not easy to do. How does he work that middle even? Here's head coach Pete Carroll.
Well, one of the keys to our whole program will be relationships, and so that's a paramount part of everything, because I need to find out who these guys are, and I need to figure out what they're capable of being, and I can't do that if I don't communicate with them. I don't look at them, watch them, see them, listen to them, and then the challenge is just to put them in positions to do what they do really well. And if you do that, then you have a chance to maximize whatever your team is. And that's a performance model mentality. It's building for the staff and all that. We can only be as good as we can be, but we need to get as good as we can be. And so we can't do that till we know who we're dealing with. And so we can communicate with them really well and all that. And then you don't have a chance at finding your limits unless you have great standards and principles that you build your program on. And so the expectations are as high as you could possibly get. We want to be the best practicing team in the game of football. And so that's because practice is everything. It's where you make yourself. It's where you make your team come to life. So you have to practice with the effort and the enthusiasm and the toughness that I talked about. And if you don't do it smart, then you're screwing it up, So so I don't know how you figure out how that sounds to you about the dichotomy or whatever. But if we're not having fun, then we're missing the whole boat. This is football. We play football, So with all of that said, that's what this program is going to exemplify, and we'll see how far that takes us.
Pete, this is a team that won 4 games last year, but they also lost a bunch of close games. When you look at the tape, and I know it's going to look different, come training camp OTAs, it's not going to be the same team. But when you did look at the tape, do you see a starting point, like a foundation of a team that?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's all kinds of assets here, and we got to get our guys back in. We have a number of free agents that we have to retain, and that's important. They have big roles to fill and play. We got to make some really great decisions business-wise, get some stuff done. We got to get Maxwell squared away, and some really important aspects of the team have to come together. But they're going to have to compete their butt off to make this thing move forward. It didn't work out quite right last year. I could give a rat's ass about last year. I don't care about that one bit. What happened, those games, those matchups, they mean nothing. So what are we going to do with the next step we take? And so be really clear about that, and we're going to need all those guys to help us, that have been there before. And that don't discount the hunger and the passion that they feel for wanting to do something that they're proud of. There's great power in that, and so we're going to try to capture that and feed off of that, meanwhile trying to wear their ass out every chance I get.
I know it's early in the process, but what's your handle on the quarterback class of this draft class?
It's really interesting. It's a diverse group. Where they all go and all that remains to be seen and all. But there's a very talented group and they've done a lot of winning. A lot of high production and a lot of style to the quarterbacks that are in this group. It's not obvious, past a couple guys, what's going to happen. But there's going to be guys throughout the ranks of this class that get chosen that are going to be star players, and they've already proven that. So it's up to the teams to get them, to put them in position to be successful. I think. And
Coach,
it's harder than it sounds.
With that being said, how I don't want to say beneficial is it that these guys go to different universities, get more games under their belt, they get more reps, get different styles? How much can that help them prepare them for the league?
Everything counts. Everything counts and helps. The guys that have been limited somewhat, in their systems, or all the signaling systems and no cadence and not under center and stuff like that, that can hamper them early on. It can be picked up and you can regain that in quick order, but it's a legitimate issue, and so we have to see if guys can transition. This time of their development for this upcoming season is enormously valuable to them if they've been in those systems that have been kind of really on one end of the spectrum. So, but the more games, the better. The more playtime, the better. And getting a 21-year-old guy versus a 24-year-old guy, there's a difference there, to some extent. And so it's just time logged. I mean, to look at all the young guys that struggle early. It's like the young coaches that struggle early, like I did. You need the experience, you need the time. And time to task is so valuable. And we watched the guys that emerge after they kind of look like they didn't make it and failed. And here comes Sam Darnold putting together a year like he had. When guys would think maybe he was long gone. Geno Smith, was in our program. He was out for 4 years. He didn't play. And then when he came back, he's comeback player of the year, and a great competitor in his position. There's all kinds of stories here. And remember, Vinny Testaverde's one of the great ones, Steve Young, another great story. You guys remember how bad Steve was early on. He was lousy, man. And then he wins Super Bowls and stuff, all-timer, Hall of Famer, so there's a lot that goes into this.
What's been your early evaluation of the trenches in your roster with O-line and D-line, and what you've seen when you look at your roster?
Yeah, we've got a young group on the offensive line with an opportunity to be really formidable. DJ did well for his first year, and JPJ, got some playtime in center and guard. Parm, it's got, of course you get, Cole Miller out there at left side, which gives us some stability too. That's a really interesting group, really anxious to see Malcolm come back to us and see Christian, get another run at it. He didn't get a great shot to get going last year, and they'll have to work their tails off to stay up with Max. So there's some. The trenches can be a really good part of our team, and counting on that. We will not be able to run the football like we want to if those guys up front can't hold up their end of it. And, so you haven't seen the best of these guys. They're just getting started. So.
You mentioned analytics at the podium. I know you guys hired Mark Hughes. I'm not sure exactly if his role includes that, but how are you guys planning on investing in analytics and kind of incorporating that in what you do, not just as a coaching staff, but overall program?
We are going to stand for a cutting-edge approach in everything that we're doing, from the ownership, Tom, on down. And So we're evaluating everything right now.
On a personal note, how excited are you as a dad to have your sons with you?
Oh, this is important. It's important. I mean, I mentioned up there about structuring the staff, and I needed guys that have been with me, that can carry the message and that can kick my ass when I needed to know what I need to know. I wanted guys that had never been around us at all, so that we could the enthusiasm, the excitement that comes from them learning who we are and how we operate, and that obligation that guys that have been with me have to take on as they introduce who we are and what we're all about. And then guys that have been on the staff before, and to get Tom McMahon's group back, and that's a great group for us, really important group for us. And to nail it on defense, with Patrick and Robbie, those guys have a lot to offer us too, because of the continuity they can generate, help us generate. So, but to have both my guys now, they will tell me what I need to hear, when I maybe not want to hear it, and that's what loyalty is all about. And we can't afford to miss, or sidestep when people are getting to know each other. We got to get going, and so it's a great factor that we've added to the staff.
Pete, you mentioned the new owners that came aboard. How much were you aware of that prior to interviewing here? And then
no, I was hearing about it. Yeah, it came through kind of loud and clear. Because of the magnitude of the individuals. Gosh, amazing. I hope you guys will get a chance to visit with them and understand what we're talking about. But Egon and Michael and Tom, those guys are big time. And then to have Tom Brady on as part of this thing too, and Mark, I think Mark did a marvelous job in figuring that out, and because they're a force, I made the point. It was like we come marching. It's like Ocean's 11, kind of that thought. There's something to it, and I would love representing it. So looking forward to it.
So there you go. Good stuff, I thought, from head coach Pete Carroll. Again, got to catch up with GM John Spytek. We had a minute to kind of get to know him, and then also what he had to say at the podium. We didn't have any session like this with Pete Carroll where we were off to the side and we were able to record a good 15 or 20 minutes. It was just more of a kind of getting to know the man who is GM John Spytek. So it's going to get busier. There's a lot going on here. Caught up with Ian Rappaport on Tuesday. I'm looking to catch up with Jeremy Fowler, Dan Graziano, Kimberly Martin, probably some more NFL insiders as well, Omar Ruiz from the NFL Network. So we'll have a lot that we'll catch up on and catch up with throughout the course of the week. And, of course, we'll bring it to you here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. And hopefully at some point the radio station is doing what it's supposed to be doing. We've been trying to handle our business, but, man, it's been tough with the internet. It's not really the radio station's fault. It's the internet near the area, the Cox internet. They went out to the radio station. They took care of it. They fixed it. But they didn't. They fixed it, but then they broke it more. So it was just weird situation. So it's trying to be taken care of. I do appreciate everyone who's tried to check in on the show, and it's been hard to listen to by way of the app. I apologize for that, but the good thing is we have the Locked On Raiders podcast, and you can always go back to this and hear what you need to hear, and I'll bring you what you need to hear here on the show. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.